Have you ever just had this gut feeling that someone isn't giving you the whole truth? Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we are completely bypassing what people simply say, and we're diving deep into the psychological mechanics of uncovering what they actually want. We're going to reconstruct true intention from the ground up and look really closely at how human behavior shifts when the pressure is finally turned on.
Okay, let's jump right in with a harsh but undeniable truth. Words are incredibly cheap. Human intent is what psychologists call a latent variable. That basically means it's not directly observable. It stays completely hidden under the surface until the environment actually forces a sacrifice. You literally cannot just look at someone and see their intent. And you certainly can't just take their word for it. You have to infer it from their actions. To really get to the bottom of this, we're going to break things down into 5 key areas: the illusion of words, pressure and trade-offs, 3 models of intent, real-world applications, and finally, blind spots and limits. This is going to give us a super robust mental model for figuring out what's really going on. Let's get to it. Starting with Section 1, the illusion of words, and why stated goals so often lead us astray. Let's completely dismantle the idea that you can just take people at face value. Look, there is a massive, stark contrast between what's easy to see and what you actually need to figure out. On one side, we have things like words, claims, and stated goals. These are highly unreliable because, well, they cost absolutely nothing to produce. Anybody can say anything. But on the flip side, we have inferred actions, inconsistencies, trade-offs, stress responses. These actions actually leak a person's true motives. If you want to analyze intent, you have to completely rely on tracking this second category.
To understand why words fail us so often, we have to look at how humans are wired. We naturally optimize for 3 specific things: reward gain, pain avoidance, and self-image protection. And that last one, it's huge. For instance, somebody might claim they're starting a new project purely to help the community, right? That perfectly protects their self-image as a generous, amazing person. But the hidden incentive might actually be a reward gain, like boosting their own social status. Because these incentives are constantly competing in our heads, total, brutal honesty is very rarely someone's first instinct. All right, moving into Section 2, pressure and trade-offs. Basically, what happens when we completely yank away the comfort zone? Here is the absolute kicker. Intent is simply what remains consistent when comfort is removed. You cannot get an accurate read on someone if they have absolutely nothing to lose. When a person is comfortable, what they say they want and what they actually want can happily coexist without any friction. It's only when you take away that comfort that you finally see what they truly prioritize. So, how do we actually test this out in the wild? You observe how a subject reacts to 4 specific leverage points. This is where you go from being a passive listener to a behavioral investigator. First, stress conditions. Stress strips away the polite mask. Second, scarcity situations, like suddenly running out of time or money. Those reveal absolute bottom-line priorities. Third, conflicting incentives force a genuinely hard choice. And finally, delayed outcomes. These expose whether someone has the discipline to match their stated long-term goals. If you understand how someone reacts to these pressure points, you can predict what they'll do way better than their own words ever could. Which brings us to Section 3, 3 models of intent. Think of this as your personal detective's toolkit. Let's see how this builds into an actionable framework. We can break intent analysis down into 3 highly structured, sequential mental models. These are basically the analytical engines that will pull the truth right up to the surface. Let's unpack each one. Model number 1 is trade-off revelation. Just think about what you do when the stakes suddenly get really high. When our choices become severely constrained, all those polite fictions just vanish. Let's say a friend constantly claims they deeply value your time, but the second a slightly better offer comes along, they fleek on you. Well, that forced trade-off just revealed their true bottom line. Their stated value was instantly overwritten by their real priority. Then we have the stress unmasking model. We all wear a social mask, a carefully curated version of ourselves for the public. But keeping that mask on takes real cognitive effort. Under sudden pressure, the brain's cognitive load gets way too high to maintain that fake persona. The mask slips, and the raw, uncurated, instinctive truth just spills right out. And the third piece of the puzzle is consistency mapping. Look, you can never ever rely on a single event. Intent is only stable if that behavior repeats across drastically different contexts. You've got to track the patterns across time and changing environments. One single instance of good behavior, that's just a data point. but consistent good behavior across varying levels of stress and comfort, now that is a true signal of intent. When we put this all together, we're scanning for 4 very specific signals. Consistency simply means stable intent. A contradiction between what they say and what they do, that screams hidden incentive. Stress deviation, meaning they only change their tune when pressured, that reveals their true priority hierarchy. And finally, resource allocation. Tracking where someone actually spends their time, energy, or money is infinitely more revealing than listening to what they promise to do tomorrow.
Okay, Section 4, Real-World Applications. How does all this theory actually play out in high-stakes environments outside of a textbook? This is where it gets super cool, because these mechanics transfer perfectly across totally different domains. In financial trading, market players reveal their true hand when they get hit with liquidity pressure, completely ignoring whatever market sentiment they claimed to have. In chess, a fake threat completely dissolves the second a forcing move reveals the player's real strategy. In cybersecurity, malicious intent is instantly exposed when a user hits a privilege constraint. Military intelligence relies on tracking actual troop and resource deployment, not listening to enemy propaganda. And even in digital systems, your true intent as a user is measured by where you allocate your attention, not what you click on a preference survey. The math behind the mechanics is identical across the board.
Finally, Section 5, Blind Spots and Limits. Time for a reality check, because we really don't want you turning into a paranoid overanalyzer here. Intent reading is an incredibly powerful tool, but it will absolutely collapse under these 4 conditions. First, highly disciplined or trained subjects can intentionally mask their behavior, even when stressed. Second, if you just don't have enough behavioral data across different contexts, your analysis is going to be flawed. Third, and this is the most dangerous one, is observer projection bias. This means you see a hidden agenda that isn't even there because you're projecting your own paranoia onto perfectly innocent actions. And lastly, if you're analyzing someone in an artificial environment where there aren't any real stakes, you aren't getting meaningful data anyway.
It all boils down to this modern psychology equation right here. Behavior equals intent plus context plus cognitive load plus environmental constraints. People are complicated. You have to remember that human behavior is full of randomness and cognitive noise. Sometimes someone isn't secretly plotting against you. Sometimes they're just having a genuinely terrible day. Because behavior is that complex, you need an ultimate sanity check. You must distinguish between normal, everyday inconsistency and a genuine hidden motive. Normal inconsistency is just part of being human. It includes situational shifts, genuinely changing your mind, or just messing up because your cognitive load is too high. Being inconsistent doesn't automatically mean you're being deceptive. A hidden motive, on the other hand, is a strategic, repeated contradiction of stated values, specifically when forced choices are on the table. To keep yourself objective and stop yourself from jumping to wild conclusions after just one weird interaction, act like a scientist. Gather empirical data, observe behavior over a long period of time, not just in isolated little incidents. You can even introduce neutral pressure tests, small, low-risk trade-offs that give you behavioral data without blowing up a relationship. Constantly compare what people say against what they actually do when constrained, and meticulously track where they allocate their resources. Listen, if you only take one thing away from this entire explainer, please let it be this. The absolute most reliable signal of intent is not a simple contradiction. It is repeated trade-off behavior under comparable constraints. That is exactly how true motives establish themselves in the real world. It's not about the one-off mistake. It's about the consistent pattern of sacrifice when the chips are down. I'm going to leave you with a slightly uncomfortable question to chew on, something to apply to your own life and the people around you. What are you willing to sacrifice? Because at the end of the day, that is the only thing that reveals what you truly value. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep observing those trade-offs until next time.